What's up, friends? Mike Ruel coming to you live from the Lufus Studios on the Mike Check Podcast, the podcast that seeks to strengthen the church to make a stronger defense of the faith by biblically checking the unbiblical. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by my lovely wife. We're going to do a special episode here today talking about marriage and oneness in marriage. And we're just raw dogging this right now. We have little to no plan, just so you know that. He
said there'd be coffee.
There'd be coffee. We coffee? We have an outline. I don't know. What could go wrong? Okay, so settling back to my conversational pose. Melanie, you've been on the podcast before. My love.
Yes.
What did we talk about last time? We talked about marriage and ministry, I believe.
I think so.
Sounds right.
Yeah. It was an early episode, and now apparently we're on episode 50.
That's right. Thank you for reminding me. This is the 50th episode, and I thought to myself, what better way to celebrate the 50th episode than with my wife right here with me in the office. And so thank you for all of those who listen, and thank you for 50 episodes. We hope that they'll be helpful, and of course, we hope that this episode will be helpful. Kind of the genesis of this is the reality that so many couples seem to be living separate lives. We do a fair amount of premarital counseling, a fair amount of marital counseling, and that kind of seems to be a recurring theme that couples are not united in marriage. And that is not the biblical basis for that. Would you say so, Mel?
Yes. Many couples, although married, seem to still be living and acting as if they are still single. And then, voila, they end up with issues. And a lot of it can be stemmed from them not acting out their one fleshness that we see in Genesis.
Yeah, and when you say living like single, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going out, sleeping around, getting drunk, staying at friends' houses for days on end, although I guess in extreme cases that's what it could mean. But really, it means that they don't seem to be united in a few of these categories, companionship-wise and spiritual-wise and practical ways with each other. Mm-hmm. But being one in marriage is a biblical concept. Genesis 2:24, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and shall hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And bonus verse, and the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. So that's my life verse, everyone. No, verse 24, right? That's the idea we're talking about here. They shall become one flesh. And that's the scriptural truth to it. It's echoed by Jesus in the famous passage in Matthew 19, where Jesus goes on to define what marriage is and speaking with the Pharisees, right? And he quotes this passage. He says, have you not heard that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So we have it in Genesis in the law. We have it in Jesus in the Gospels. And if you want to go 3 for 3, we have it in the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, in a place where we spend lots of time, don't we, sweetheart, in premarital counseling. In Ephesians chapter 5, talking about wives and husbands. Ephesians 5, let's start in verse 29. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we're members of his body. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So this is the biblical idea of marriage. Who knows, honey? Maybe this would be a book someday. Oneness in marriage. We have it in the law. We have it in Genesis, right at creation. We have it reinforced by Jesus himself in the Gospels and Matthew, and we have it, of course, in Paul, in one of the best passages to go to for marriage in Ephesians 5. So marriage is oneness. You need to be one in as many ways as possible. And so I think our goal here is to talk about some practical ways of how we can walk out that oneness. And we've got some categories, right?
Yes. The first one is companionship. What does it mean when we say companionship?
Yeah. Well, what does it mean when anyone is anyone's companion?
Yeah, I mean, it's your spouse really should be your closest friend, your person that you share your heart with, the person that you have no secrets with, that you're trusting the most, that obviously before you're phoning 5 friends about something, you're talking with your spouse about it, talking to God, talking to your spouse. Really should be the order of things. They have what we say in our marriage is that all access pass. There's no secrets. There's no, you can't see my text messages. That's private.
Wait, you know all my passwords?
Yes.
You can go on all of my devices?
I can.
And that's kind of the essence of it, right? You should be able to do that. And the other person shouldn't be nervous about that.
Right.
If there's something to be nervous about, there's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're your go-to. They're your person.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the sweetest things. Next month, April 30th, we will be married for 31 years. Wait, hold on. No, that wasn't it.
We did it, honey.
31 years.
Yep.
This is the year that I'm going to be a good husband.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen this year. I'm so close, so close. But my point in that is that I obviously still love you. I obviously still am attracted to you. But that love morphs and changes. And I think one of the sweetest things that I've realized in our marriage as we get to 31 years is this aspect of companionship. Like, there is no one else in the world that I would rather hang out with than my wife. And that's kind of the essence of what we mean by companionship. It's literally your best friend. Like, if you have an option of hanging out with your spouse or anyone else in the world, I'm picking my spouse. I'm picking Melanie hands down every time. And that's what we mean by companionship, okay? And that comes with varying levels of intimacy. Emotional intimacy is a big part of that, right? Where we're not just sharing facts about what's going on in our lives. We're sharing our feelings, we're sharing our dreams, we're sharing our struggles, we're sharing our fears, all of that stuff. There's a certain amount of vulnerability in that where you don't have that vulnerability with just anybody that you work with, or, you know, even a lot of people at church. But I think, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this too, we see this in counseling where that's not happening. Like, they are not talking. They're not sharing things.
Right.
Where it's kind of the side to side, like survival mode, like just tell me where the kids are and where you're going. And
Right. And we get that there's obviously seasons. We're in a season of having grown children, empty nest per se. And we understand, you know, we're not in the midst of it with toddlers and sport, or the next phase with sports and all of those things. That's what we talked about, all the seasons.
seasons.
Last
Oh, we
time.
did. We talked about that.
Yeah. But that's not an excuse not to talk to your spouse.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's you're setting aside time, you're doing what you need to do so that you're communicating well with each other.
Yeah.
Whether it's first thing in the morning, last thing in that night, once the kids are finally in bed,
Yep.
you know, making that time for that emotional intimacy portion of your relationship.
Yeah. And to your point, that people might be rolling their eyes and saying, well, yeah, great. You guys don't have any kids at home. You've got a dog, right?
And a mom.
And a mom and a cat. But, right, that's what we're saying. You still have to fight for whatever level of intimacy and companionship time that you can get, right? It's okay. Yeah, it's not going to look like when you're an empty nester. It's just not going to look like it during survival mode when you got little kids and you're running them around and school zone and all of that stuff where you feel like you're just a taxi. It is going to be more difficult to find that time. But our point is you have to find that time. If it's 5 minutes a day where you can look each other in the eye and just communicate and talk to each other. If it's getting, this is probably drifting into some more of the practical things, but, plan a night away, like twice a year. Like, doesn't matter where it is. Get somebody's house or cabin that you can just go for free, or book a hotel where you can save up and do it for a night. Like, those things are critical in just having those kind of refuge, that handle where you can be like, oh, we're going to get here and then we're going to spend time together. Can you talk about some of the maybe companionship or intimacy killers that might squash some of our intimacy?
Yeah.
I put my phone on my desk, but I really wanted to be on my phone and say like,
Yeah, I
oh,
hear
sorry, I
you.
wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, I think I had that down with the practical. But yeah, I mean, it's if your spouse is talking to you, put your phone down.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it like the rest. But listen. Or just say, let me finish this text and then I will be listening to you. Something to acknowledge them.
Yeah.
Because it's so important that they have your full attention. Then
Yep.
you won't be in that situation where they'll be like, I told you that. And you're like, no, you didn't. I'm like, yeah, I did. You were just on your phone and you probably didn't hear me. So,
Yeah.
if you need to physically take it out of their hand.
Wow. You've never
and
done that
put it
before.
on the table or throw it somewhere. But just say to your spouse, I need 5 minutes. I need 2 minutes. Or if it's opposite, say, and you just need to check in with them, just do a quick check-in. How are you doing?
Yeah.
How was your day? And take
Yeah.
a
I
few
mean, those are
minutes.
things companions would ask one another, right?
Yes.
How are you doing? How was your day? All of those things. I also thought of David and Jonathan, and this is not gay, but David and Jonathan in 1 Samuel 18, as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. That's a level of companionship, right? That if that's just a friendship, which it is just a friendship, between David and Jonathan, how much more should a marriage be? We should be knit together in our very souls in that. That's so, so important.
Yeah, and if we are knit together in our souls, then we're going to want to check on to see how our other soul is doing, and do some heart checks and ask some hard questions, and don't just take the "I'm fine" with the
Yeah.
fine, which it's not fine. To dig a little bit deeper,
Yeah.
even if you're like, I don't believe you, the kids go to bed, let's talk, and figure
one.
out what's going on.
Yeah.
Because if they're not telling you, they're probably telling someone. And if they're just shoving it down and not talking about it at all, that's even worse. So you want to be the person that your spouse is coming to talk through whatever's going on in their heart.
And that's a good point too, right? Because we do have that need for emotional intimacy and companionship. And so if we're not sharing it with one another, we are sharing it with someone else. And all you're doing then is robbing from your emotional intimacy in your marriage and cultivating it with someone else. And that's where emotional affairs come into play, even just relationships with same sex, right? That are just way too close, that get in the middle of a marriage and of that intimacy. And so, maybe another practical thing in companionship is reserve your deepest levels of emotional sharing and intimacy for your spouse.
Right.
Right? We all have that need to be vulnerable with one another and be transparent. That's got to be with your spouse.
And if your spouse is sharing that with you, please be listening.
Yep.
because it doesn't always happen. And it just reminds me totally different. But when you have adult kids or teenage kids who maybe aren't going to be talking to you that much, and then all of a sudden you're in the car with them and they start talking about everything,
Yeah.
it's like you're a captive audience and you're listening.
Yep.
When they're talking, you're listening. And that it should be the same way with your spouse.
Yeah. 100%. So first way to be one in marriage is a deep level of companionship. The second way, second category of oneness in marriage is sexual.
Sorry, kids.
Sorry, kids. Fast forward this part. But the way God designed sex, and Melanie said I couldn't bring any diagrams or anything, but it's a physical representation of the oneness of flesh. Like there is nothing greater that you can do to be one with another person, which is why God reserves it for the most intimate covenant companionship of marriage. And so, sex should be a priority in the relationship. And I think speaking as a dude, right? Sometimes we're like, well, we're not, wish we had more sex. And we just kind of isolate that as this is a problem in the sexual portion of our marriage. No, but where did we start? We started with emotional intimacy and companionship. So if you do not have emotional intimacy, you are not going to have sexual intimacy. It's
Right.
not going to work like that. And maybe you can talk about that from the relationship between emotional and sexual intimacy from a female perspective.
Females were probably much more, most of us, emotional beings. So we don't want at 10 o'clock at night our spouse to be like, come on, let's go, when they haven't even asked me how my day was, or they walked into chaos and then went to go play video games, or whatever the situation may be. Then all of a sudden it's time to be intimate, and there hasn't been any intimacy in weeks, emotional or otherwise.
Yeah.
So the two are very strongly connected.
Yeah.
We would often say in our premarital counseling that foreplay for sexual intimacy at 10 o'clock at night starts...
10 o'clock at night?
I know, we're way asleep.
How about 7:30? Gosh.
Starts at 7 in the morning. Like, here's a cup of
Right.
coffee,
Right.
What do you have on your agenda for today? How was your time with Jesus this morning? That's a good one.
How did that go yesterday that you were telling me about that you were really worried about, or what's going on with your mom, or what's happening with the kids, or...
Right.
Yeah, so dudes, don't isolate or don't try to isolate sex as its own problem, that we have to work on that. Or our marriage would be better if you wanted to have sex more. It's like, okay, well, how about you be more emotionally intimate and work on the companionship and then come back to me and tell me how better your sex life is? Because those two things are connected. I think frequency is important. I think 7 times a week minimum that you're... What? Oh, okay. No,
We're not like some of the newlywed couples that we know.
it is important, and it should be a priority. If you have to put it on the calendar in code, put it on the calendar in code. But always remember communication itself.
And get a lock on your door, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, that's true. We've talked to a lot of couples too, where it's just like they don't have the physical...
Like, with the kids. I'm like, put a lock on your door. The kids go to bed.
They literally don't have a spot for themselves that's going to be safe without a kid crawling into bed, which, okay, that gets into another thing, right? That survival mode is survival mode. I remember that. There was a time where I woke up in the morning and I wasn't sure who I was going to wake up with. It was going to be one of my children and not my wife. But you see how that's so important. Self-discipline and control and running a family correctly with bedtime routines and kids staying in bed is massively important, especially for sexual intimacy. Okay? So we have companionship oneness, we have sexual oneness, and of course, this being the mic check and checking things biblically, we have spiritual oneness.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Obviously, hopefully, along with what Scripture tells us, you are married to a believer. It's going to be really, really hard, if not impossible, to be spiritually one with someone who is not a believer in Jesus Christ, which is why You absolutely have to marry another believer. There's no missionary dating. There's no he's close to being a Christian or I think he loves God. You guys need to have the same worldview, the same priorities. You must be married to a believer.
And of course, there are those situations where someone will come to Christ after getting married.
Yep.
And the spouse isn't quite there yet. But oh my goodness, have we seen even in our own church how many spouses have come to Christ after the wife or the husband came first and just from their witness and sharing the gospel.
Was that Titus? They might be
out.
won without a word by the conduct of their lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know I said that, and I know I was strong in the way that I said that, and I know there are probably people listening here who are saying, well, great, I'm not married to a believer, or we both were non-believers when we were married, and I came to faith, and my spouse did not. I understand that. We talk to people in that situation. That is a difficult situation. Remain faithful. Pray for your spouse. Live it out. You're still one flesh, even though you're unequally yoked. Get into a good church and let them help you and support you. Hopefully some relationships can be built with your spouse as well, and they can be drawn into the fellowship, and so for the rest of this, we're talking to two believers then. So the rest of this section here for spiritual oneness, rather, we're talking to two believers. And so one of the first things, and it's probably something that you should go no doubt about, is go to church together.
Absolutely.
Like the same church. Like we've heard tell of people who are like, well, my wife goes to a different church. It's like, oh wait, I gotta find it. Oh no. Oh. All right, forget that. We've heard tell of people where it's like, my wife goes to a different church. And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
That is absolutely not okay.
Right. Yeah. Not only should you be going together, you should both be members of the same church.
Yep.
Or in the process of membership if you're engaged. And serving together.
Yep.
This is huge. I love when I walk into church and I see couples serving together. Ned and Dawn, Jimmy and Leslie.
Oh, we're
Sue
dropping names
and,
now.
Sue
Okay, I
and
see how it is.
John, all these couples, they're out front. But what I would love to see and challenge you all, those of you who especially have kids, what more fun would it be to serve in Kingdom Kids together on a Sunday morning with 2 and 3-year-old toddlers screaming everywhere?
Shout out.
So, get down there together. And I do see some, and I'm, grateful for that. But how great would it be if more couples would be volunteering maybe once a quarter? That would be so helpful, to be down there. Your kids are either in your same class or in the next classroom, and they're seeing you serve together. And, that builds intimacy.
Yeah, definitely. And so, hopefully it's bottom shelf. And a lot of you are going, no duh, but go to church together. Like as much as possible, ride in the same car together, going to church together, do the same things together. Melanie and I, have meetings together and other things and other ministries we're involved in. Of course, you're going to be involved in different things here and there, but overall, the objective should be to serve together. When I'm doing the worship team schedule, for example, for people on stage, I'm as much as possible, I'm going to try to put married couples together on the same day, trying to coordinate with the tech team. So if one's in the sound booth and one's playing, on stage, we're going to do that together to make sure that works. So we're all as much as possible. But absolutely be members together, be involved in the church together, be involved in church decisions and member meetings together. And all of that will cultivate spiritual oneness. What else can we do, my love, for spiritual oneness? Maybe even outside the church in our homes and whatnot.
One of the things you can do that's very intimate is praying together. Spend time, a few minutes, doesn't have to be, a 5-minute long, exegesis of.
Well, the Greek says here.
A quick prayer in the morning, praying for your days, praying for a couple of people who are on your heart, or at night, whatever works best with your schedule. Very intimate times to be praying together, reading God's word together.
Yep.
If, family devotions, whether or not you have kids or not. I mean, it's just the two of us some nights, but we still have our
Yeah.
family devotions.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that's very important.
Yeah. And praying together is intimacy, as you said. So pro tip for you husbands out there, grab your wife's hand, look her in the eyes, and say, how can I pray for you? And then do it. Okay. This goes against a lot of things in us men, because us men want to be fixers. Our wives are crying and we want to figure out how to make it stop as soon as possible. Yeah. She has a dilemma. We're like, oh, well, why don't you just do this? Right. Mm-hmm. So it comes out of us. We're fixers. Okay. But in this prayer time, we're not the fixers. We go to the fixer. Right. And so don't offer your opinion. Don't offer how 5 things that she can do right away to make this problem go away. Look her in the eyes, grab her hands, listen to her concerns, and pray for her. Pro tip, husbands, that was for free. Okay.
And also, encouraging one another with scripture as well could be, a good way to work, to live out that one flesh.
Yep.
Talking about spiritual things. Talking about the sermon.
Yep.
What the heck was Pastor Mike talking about in Revelation this week?
Oh, gosh, he's been nannering on and on about beasts and horns and angels and... Yeah. What does all that mean?
Go to a care group together.
Ayo, that wasn't even on our list.
I know. I just saw that
She's
one.
starting to fire on all cylinders now.
That's the coffee.
Absolutely. Go to a small group together.
Midweek. Of
some kind. Go to midweek together. Go to a care. I can't emphasize a care group enough. Go to a care group together. Go to a Bible study together.
If there isn't one that fits with your schedule and you're a member, start one.
Yep. Talk to me. We'll get it cranked up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely do those things. Also, of course, building on prayer, like praying alone, praying as a couple, but also praying as a church. Go to prayer meeting together. Right? Hear what the concerns of other people are and pray for them.
We had a lot of people at prayer meeting last week.
That was great.
Yeah. I think it was a record.
Yeah. So companionship, oneness, sexual oneness, spiritual oneness. And I think our last section that we just want to end on here is some practical kind of ideas of how to walk out this oneness, getting real practical. So what would you say are a couple practical ideas, hon, for folks to walk out this oneness we've been speaking of?
I think just practically just doing things together, being together. If you're both off on a day and you need to go food shopping and it makes sense to go together, go together. I mean, maybe if you have 4 kids in tow, that might not be practical. But just simple things like running errands together, going to Costco together.
Costco, I've heard of that.
Costco. Sharing a calendar.
Holy moly. This is so important.
Yeah. So I know it's 2025. Some of you are still using paper calendars.
If you're not watching YouTube, I'm giving you the shake of condemnation right now. But honestly, whatever works.
But if you have a calendar on your fridge to write things on, a wipe-off calendar, something so that you know what's going on in your household.
Yeah. But for anyone born after 1985, I don't even know anymore. I'm so old. You have a calendar on your flippin' phone, which is in your pocket, okay? And so does your wife, because we all have smartphones. We all have iPhones. The unregenerate have Androids or Google phones. But seriously, they have the capability to connect a calendar, whether that is through the cloud, iCloud in the Apple world, or whether that's through the great Satan, Google and Gmail, however you're going to do it, share a honkin' calendar. I can't tell you how many see, I'm getting fired up. How many arguments and miscommunications and whatnot that is going to save. It's super frustrating because I'll be like, hey, can you do this on this day? I don't know. Let me ask my wife. It's like, okay. I get that. But you could also, if you just were able to pull up something here that showed
Okay,
everything
next
that you were
subject.
doing. Okay, sorry. Ramping out on that.
So another thing that you can do is actually go on dates or
What?
have at-home dates
What?
where you set aside time. We used to have a time where we called candle chat, where we would go down into Mike's office, light a candle, maybe have some soda to drink, and talk about the week. Talk about what went on, because it's been a busy week and we haven't been able to connect
Yeah.
and pray together
Yeah.
and just be together
Yeah.
without our phones.
And again, the whole reason we're doing this, right, is when you get that moment when it's like, the kids are in bed, so many couples just then retreat to your corners.
Yeah.
Like,
They're
I'm going to go
watching
read
different shows.
I'm going to go to the garage and tinker with this. I'm going to go on play video games. You're going to whatever, or just pick up your phone and go into a doom scroll.
Right.
Right? Yeah, no, that's the time to engage. And I'll tell you, right? And this, Melanie's heard this before, so no, I'm not talking out of school, but there are times where it's like, okay, like now's the time. Like we both got home, we both, whatever, now's the time to engage in conversation. And you're like, I don't think I have the energy for this. Like, that's exactly where we have to go. We have to push through that, right? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's where it's like, no, I'm going to engage. I'm going to put the phone down. I'm going to ask my wife, like, what's going on? And sometimes just verbalize that. Like we'll say practically, because we're in the practical section, right? Let's have 15 minutes of phone time. And then, we'll talk. Or we'll have reading time for a little while. Then we'll talk. Then we'll watch a show for a little while or whatever it is. But communicate these things out loud. So it's not just endless kind of whatever's happening, right? But don't retreat to your corners. Go to each other. And if you want to work on something by yourself for a little while, just say, hey, I'm going to go in the garage and tinker with this for a half hour or an hour. Or another practical thing, going back to the calendar, and I won't harp on the calendar anymore, but like look for times, like I looked ahead on our calendar this week and I noticed that my wife is going to be working on Saturday and she's going to be working for like half the day or something. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, what are those things that I can do that I want to get done that are by myself? So I'm not doing these things by myself when Mel's home, so I can maximize my time with Mel when she's home. So when she's away, what are the things I'm going to do by myself? Well, I'm going to wash the truck, or I'm going to, continue to work outside, or some things, that are by myself. So be strategic in the way that you pick these things on your calendar as well.
Yeah, and one of the other things is go to bed at the same time.
That's just crazy, dog.
It's hard, let me tell you, because he likes to go to bed. Sometimes, like, I am not ready. 8:30, I'm like, no. Last night I was ready. I was watched a 5-month-old and he wore me out.
Yeah.
But there have been times where I'm like, okay, but I'm going to bring my Kindle. And because you're going to be asleep in 3 seconds and I'm not quite ready. And I'm just going to read for a while in bed. But we're going to bed at the same time.
Yeah.
It's...
Yeah. That's another one of those
whenever
things.
possible. I know there's people that work, shift work.
That's different.
Work late.
That's different.
Different schedules. But if you are both home and it's bedtime, go to bed together.
Yeah.
Get up together.
Well, that doesn't ever happen. We hit one out of two there.
Sorry. I require more sleep than he does.
It's true. Scientifically, women do require more sleep than men. But I was going to say something, and you just threw me off. Yeah, it's just a recipe for disaster. And I've heard so many stories talking to men, husbands, and especially if you're talking about things like pornography, or you're talking about cultivating emotional intimacy with someone who you're, in the chats with, talking to, or whatever else. When does that stuff happen? It happens when your wife's in bed and you're the dope that's still up, that's, doesn't want to go to bed with your wife, and you're going to search for porn, or you're going to, that's where sin wants to get us alone, right? And wants to capitalize on that opportunity. So it is so much more beneficial to continue to do practical things like, yes, go to bed at the same time together, right? Kiss each other a good night. My wife frequently reminds me of that, right? Sometimes I'm just
You're
so
getting better.
shot when I get into bed that it's like I just roll over and want the little angels to carry me away to Never Never Land. But then I forgot. Always kiss your wife. What else, honey?
Before you kiss the dog.
Wow.
Sorry.
Gonna edit that out.
No, you're not. I don't know. What else is on our list? Do we get everything?
Did we talk about erranding together?
We did a little bit. Yeah.
A little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Eating dinner together.
That's a big one.
It sounds pretty practical, but
Yeah. Like Paul says in 1 Corinthians, wait for one another, right? To eat dinner. Like, I'm going to wait for my wife to come home or whatever it is. Like, hey, when are you going to be home? Let's eat. Don't just think like, hey, I grabbed something at McDonald's on the way home. I'm good. Or, I ate like, sometimes that happens, okay, with crazy schedules, but the default should be meals together and planning to have meals together as much as possible. And again, we have crazy schedules too where that doesn't happen, but the default should be together. And just building on the erranding together, right? It's, again, there's nobody you should want to hang out with more than your spouse. And so that being said, like, it really doesn't matter what you're doing. Husbands will, wives will be like, I'm going to the store. You want to come with me? And husbands will be, well, why the heck would I want to go to the store? Like, I don't want to do that. Like, you're gone. I could do something else. It's like, well, yeah. And there's a time for that. But going back to where we started, if you haven't had time together, get your butt in the car and go to the store with your wife. Because, I don't want to go to the store either, but I want to be with my wife. And yeah, we have car time and we have walking around the store time where we're talking and we're intimate together, communicating with each other, practical ways that you can foster oneness.
yeah. And I would even say that, in some circles or in even Christian circles, people will want more girl time or guy time than they will want time with their spouse.
Yeah.
So I
Girl
would
time's fine. Guy time's fine. Golf time's fine.
Golf time's fine.
Yep.
But if it's a week where you haven't connected with your spouse and then you're
Not
going to
fine.
be gone for 3 days golfing, it's probably not okay, Or have you even checked in with your wife to be like, ooh. So it's just something to be mindful of. Not saying that you can't have activities that are your own and that you don't share with your spouse, but just be mindful of the time.
Yeah. Well, any other closing thoughts that you think we missed, my love?
I don't think
I
so.
don't think so. I think we covered a lot of good practical ground. And I think I would like to continue this discussion as we have you back on the program. We're trying to figure out a name for this. We're on a couch. It's couple's couch. And we have coffee on the, I don't know, we're working on that. But anyway.
M&M.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode with my lovely wife talking about oneness in marriage. If you'd like to find out more about the Mic Check Podcast, you can visit us on the miccheckpodcast.com. If you'd like to find out more about Highlands Bible Church, honey, what time do we worship and when do we worship?
We worship Sundays, the Lord's Day, 9:30 a.m. Highlands Bible Church, Vernon, New Jersey.
You can. What did I do that for? You can find out more information at highlandsbiblechurch.org. We're also on the socials. And until next time, keep checking the unbiblical with the biblical. And we will see you again on the Mic Check. Good job, honey. Oh.
Spaz.
See you.